Hi, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Nellie McKay and her new album, Sister Orchid. It's one of my all-time favorite musicians. You're going to love her. You might know her from her hit album, Get Away From Me, plus all the other stuff she's done. And she's here for us now, Nellie McKay. So how are you going to approach the 2020 election?
This was one more. Also, Obama built the deportation machine. I mean, if you just look that up, there are a number of articles that come up, from places like The Nation, who, of course, endorsed him. I mean, this is not,
and Fusion.
And what's in Fusion?
Fusion also did reporting on Barack Obama's deporting.
Right, but so many people still don't know that. I mean, there's, and then you feel
Barack Obama created private prisons for immigrants.
Right. And the whole thing of not looking back is that's always used to cover up the worst, because whether it's looking back at 8 years of Obama and how that led to Trump, or looking back at how his not prosecuting the torturers paved the way for Gina Haspel, who also would not have been confirmed if it wasn't for Democratic votes.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. Democrats are complicit. And it's amazing how they always get just enough Democrats to pass whatever horrible thing they're trying to do.
No.
Isn't that amazing?
But then there are enough who can run in 2020 who said, we didn't vote for that.
Yes.
And the only thing is that military budget, no one really pays attention to that, because blowing up black and brown kids, that isn't racist, and blowing up women and children, that isn't profoundly, a rather profound version of misogyny. You
would think.
I mean, you have this liberal class that gay marriage is a deal breaker. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but blowing up children is okay. And that is the Faustian bargain. Is that how you say it, Faustian?
Yes, that's it.
It's that is the moral bankruptcy, and that's what I have subscribed to my whole life, up until 2016, when for so many of us, the fever broke, thanks to this show.
Aha. Well,
and other sources.
I owe it all to Thomas Frank and Listen Liberal, although he's not going to take credit, because even after he wrote that book, he voted for Hillary. Which was mind-blowing.
No, this is what, I mean, look at Bertolt Brecht. I mean, in New York City, they mount productions of Mother Courage or Threepenny Opera, and then they vote for Wall Street and War, and myself included. I mean, a lot of people don't make the connections, but even when people do, they will not only do it, but they will attack you for not subscribing to that. And it's
isn't it funny that we live in an era where people attack the voters instead of the horrible politicians who can't attract people to vote for them?
Well, it's by design, again, of course, but they have been indoctrinated into this idea that if you vote for what you most need, what you so terribly need, you will get what you most fear. And that's why we need a new, Bernie could run as a Green, then he would have ballot access in 50 states. I think the problem with him running as an independent is ballot access. It's according to one friend. Yeah,
that's what they say. It's too big of a lift, because to get the ballot access is tough. But you can run as a Green, and then people say, "Oh, the Green Party's flawed." You don't think that the Democratic Party is flawed?
It's just because they still have closed primaries, right? I mean, I know. I was in open states and closed states, and I know the difference, Jimmy. I mean, it was wonderful. The sense of freedom in open states. I'm not saying they don't have their troubles, but the idea that people could really just decide from across the political spectrum up until the day of voting. I think it was at least that way in Wisconsin, and I believe it was in Michigan too, that you had same day, you could decide what party to vote for. That's a wonderful sense of freedom. I mean,
there should be same day registration.
Yeah.
There should be, you're an American, you get to vote.
Right.
Right? You don't you missed the deadline. The deadline for being an American?
Right.
I'm an American.
Right.
I get to vote.
Of course.
That should be it. Bam.
Of course. And I don't mean to hold up Wisconsin as this beacon of voting rights, because it isn't. But it is great that people, they had a little choice in this life. God forbid.
God forbid we have choice. Well, if my corporate Democrat friends who voter shame have their way, we won't have any choice. And you only get two choices, and it's a binary choice. How many times have you heard that? It's a binary choice, Jimmy. You have to choose one. No, I don't. The whole point of America is that you freedom of expression. You get to do what you want.
Right.
It's the craziest thing to me. Yeah. So, I'll ask you one more time. Why do you think Bernie's doing this? I mean, you don't have to answer. We can cut it out.
No, I just, he's he has a portrait of Eugene Debs in his office.
Yes, that's right. I was in his office. I saw it.
The problem, I think a lot of the problem is that we not only have parties, we have personalities. And so people want that charismatic personality. And Bernie is not just charismatic, he does have integrity. So he is someone who people will listen to. I don't know. Jimmy, I don't know.
I wish I knew too, and I wish he would come on the show so I could ask him that question, but they're afraid of me asking that question, so he won't come on the show. They talk to me on the phone and say, sure, we're going to get him on the show, and then they never get him on the show, so they're just jagging us around. Isn't it funny that he's supposed to be the leading progressive, and he doesn't come on a progressive show like this? Like, is there another show more progressive than this that you know of?
Oh, no. I almost wish if he was going to run as a Democrat that he wouldn't run.
So I think the only way to change, all the big changes have come from third parties, right? They, the two parties, either they absorb the ideas,
right,
or they just change the party, right? So how the Republicans got rid of the Whigs, but then, Debs and the influence he had on FDR was immeasurable. I mean, anyway.
No.
Debs said, I'd rather vote for something I want and not get it than vote for something I don't and get it.
Right. Of course.
Right.
Of course. I mean, when you look at, say Raytheon, they make the Tomahawk missile. The Tomahawk missile, correct me if any of this is up, but as I believe, they have cluster bombs. Cluster bombs cover a couple of football fields, right? It's carpet bombing. There's no place to hide. If they do not detonate, they often look like little soccer balls with little ribbons attached. They're found for however long after, and can be some years, by children who want to play with them, who get blown up. I mean, if they are giving money towards the media entity, for instance, they sponsor MSNBC, where Rachel Maddow works, and that has become arguably the most pro-war channel.
Isn't that's surprising, right? That Rachel Maddow became a war hawk.
No, so much has changed. I know.
And she does it for $30,000 a day.
Right.
Are you surprised that's how much money she makes? She makes more than that now, by the way.
I thought it was $8 million a year. Yeah. So how much does that?
So she probably makes more than that now because she's been the number one show for a while.
Right. And, you don't stay there if you don't say what they want to say. You can make yourself believe it. So you can say, I really believe this. But if you're not going to take that point of view, you're not going to be sitting there long.
Right.
And Raytheon contributes to people like Kamala Harris. So, follow the money. I mean, that should be so easy to do. People seem to have no interest. I wonder if it's because they feel bought and paid for in their life, and they somehow apply that to politicians, even though it's on a completely different scale. I mean, it is possible to work in an industry and want to see the end of that industry. You take a paycheck because you have to feed your family, but you despise what they do.
Yeah, like if you work for the tobacco companies, say,
right,
or something like that.
Right, but we're talking at a level that is so far beyond your average Jane or Joe.
Yes, and I would say it's worse,
right,
what they're doing than working for a tobacco company, because at least people get to make the decision whether they smoke or not.
Right.
I don't get to make the decision whether we drop drones on innocent people or not.
No.
I don't get to make the decision, as Tom Friedman said, that we needed to go from Basra to Baghdad, house to house, terrorizing people in Iraq.
Right.
That was his prescription for after 9/11, that we needed to go door to door, terrorizing people in a country that didn't attack us. That's the New York Times Pulitzer Prize winner.
Right.
And of course, they fired Chris Hedges, but they give Tom Friedman awards.
Oh, for kidding! It's the surest way to be promoted.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is to be pro rah war.
Yeah. And that's the adults in the room.
That's that's a grown-ups.
Right.
Thomas Friedman.
Right.
Who just may be the most bloodthirsty, psychopathic scumbag working today, and he's heralded, and they can't book him enough on TV shows.
I know, it's unbelievable.
And it's like, this is the guy who you're getting to come give us the truth about war. That's the guy,
right?
The guy who advocated literally killing people who had nothing to do with killing innocent people and terrorizing them, ripping them out of their house.
Right.
You imagine if you said, if you were an Iraqi and you said, what we needed to do is go to California and go from San Diego to San Francisco, house to house. House to house.
Right, right.
You imagine if you said, I mean, that's what he's advocating.
Right.
I don't know. I'm a little overwhelmed by the situation. Can we talk about, let's talk about your album.
Well, but if you put it in nice enough language, you know, in the language of the intelligentsia, and, you know, and you do it with a smile on your face, you have a nice demeanor, you're not crazy like Trump, you know, you can say anything. You can advocate for anything. Who dropped the 2 atomic bombs?
You know,
he's on the dime.
I know. I say this to people, and then they make fun of me for it. I'm like, we're the only one who ever dropped an atomic bomb. There's nothing worse than dropping an atomic bomb. And people are like, oh, really? Yes.
Right. Well, because when you talk about lesser of two evils, you know, and people take it to a drastic place, you know, let's say Stalin versus Hitler. But I think perhaps the better analogy would be Truman versus Hitler, because who would most people vote for? And then look what you agreed to. When did you wait? Because if you wait that long, you don't get out then. You've got to get out now. We should have got out in 2000.
So you don't buy the theory of people like Sam Harris who say that the Muslim ideology is evil and we have to, and it's okay if we bomb the shit out of the Middle East because we're trying to do nice things, which is basically his theory. I'm sure he would disagree with me because he never agrees with anybody who says anything about what he says, but he says that stuff.
Right. Yeah. No. I don't see how I can vote for bombing people anymore. So I think that pretty much rules out Bernie.
Well, Bernie is actually doing, you know, he did make some good statements about what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, no, I know. That's the thing. He's better. So are we going to get sucked in, Jimmy? You know, he was a compromise in 2016. You know, he's not perfect. He's not pure. As Cornel West says, it's not about purity. It's about integrity. You know, he supported Bernie and then he supported Jill Stein. So, but the more I know, the more I doubt whether I can go back to that. And I hate that there's even any doubt, because I know people in 2016 who said, I can't vote for Bernie, you know, and I respected them for that. If he was too, if it was too much a compromise on foreign policy, you know, it's the same as, you know, Johnson with Vietnam and the Great Society.
Do you think Bernie made one of those Faustian bargains that I get to say whatever I want about domestic policy if I go along with your foreign policy of war?
I don't know how explicit it is, but I think it's there. He's America, you know? But this country is a corporate wasteland. It's been gutted from the inside. And when you spend over half of every tax dollar on perpetual war, you're not... It would be smart for the empire to make things a little better here while we destroy other countries. But the empire doesn't even seem to be that smart, or we would have had Bernie. And it's how can you do that? How can you say in exchange, say, for my right to an abortion, I'm going to blow up a woman in front of her baby or a baby in front of its mother? You know, how can you say that in exchange for largely lip service towards civil rights in this country, or the occasional elevation of people to roles of power, that I'm going to blow off the legs off a little kid in Africa? I mean, it's, you know.
So you're saying you're not, even though you were a canvasser last time for Bernie Sanders, you're not going to work for him the next time if he runs as a Democrat? Not only that, but you won't vote for him?
What kind of policy, what kind of position can he take? You know, say he took a position, I suppose, if it was that of Ralph Nader's, right, within the Democratic Party, how far can one person advance that position even if he did get the nomination? I mean, what do you think?
What do I think?
I'm throwing it back at you, Jimmy, because
People know what I think.
Yeah. So you would not support Bernie as a Democrat?
You know what? I hadn't thought about it until we started talking about if I would support. I just always thought I would. And then you're saying all this stuff about foreign policy, and it's making me rethink.
It's a trap. It's the thing Roseanne DeMoro was putting out about SB 562. Was that the bill here? You know, with the Charlie Brown and the football, and they keep The only reason I'm still registered would be if he runs his 2020, and I just think it's such a mistake. It's like the nonprofit industrial complex. You know?
Yeah.
How many years? How many decades?
Well, my whole point is people say, well, a third party is not viable, and if you run third party, you only maybe. I say if Bernie ran third party, he would get 10 or 15% of the vote, and then the Democrats can't win without him. And then now you have real negotiating power. So either they absorb your ideas, or they have to become a coalition, or they have to do. Now you have power. But if you go into the primary saying no matter what happens, I'm going to vote blue,
right,
you've lost all your power.
No, and he also
that's why. And when Hillary went to the right after the primary and picked Tim Kaine.
I know.
Instead of picking Bernie, all she had to do was pick Bernie, and she would have won the presidency. But she went to the right because they were not going for progressives; they were going for Republican votes. Chuck Schumer laid it out.
Right.
That's not a hyperbole. They were literally going for suburban Republicans, Democrats.
Right.
That's how they were going to win.
Right. Right.
They're going to steal Republican votes, not get their base, not get workers,
right,
not get progressives.
Right.
They went to the right.
Right.
I mean, that's just so. That's why we definitely need a third-party challenge, because the Democrats aren't changing.
No,
even when they were faced... I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead. You just keep...
Even when they were faced with the possibility of Trump, she chose to go right.
Right.
And people still wagged their finger at people who didn't vote for her.
Right.
Like, she did everything she could to make sure people wouldn't.
Right. Well, they say the right things sometimes. They wear nice clothes. Most people don't really follow it. They pick a team, and they never leave. Love trumps hate. Love?
Love?
Just what a belittling of the word love to associate it with what corporations do, the poisoning of the land, the air, the soil, what it does to people. People who look for the rare earth minerals in our devices, they die of cancer in their 40s and 50s. I mean, disaster capitalism is so cruel. It's so horrendous. And who does it mostly hurt? Overwhelmingly the poor. Who are the majority of the poor? They're not white. They're not male. And yet you have this party that pretends to be a beacon of feminism and civil rights and love. Oh,
And then they do that to a word like love.
Yeah. It's just despicable. As horrible as Trump is, when I hear it, when you get those, oh, no. Oh, no. That's not a choice. That's not a life worth living, is to make that choice,
So,
one more thing. When you look at welfare reform of 1994, so-called reform, which is actually a gutting of the whole social safety net. Yeah. 70% of those cut were children.
Yes. I know.
No.
Well, how do we go to bed at night knowing 1 out of 4 kids is in poverty in America?
Right.
I mean, and it's probably much higher than that because we all know the poverty level is BS.
Right.
I mean, it should be much higher.
Right.
So,
well, people will say, well, we all want that, but it's a matter of strategy.
yeah.
The only strategy is out if you can take a realistic view of what has gone on really the past 100 years, but certainly the last 40, the first rule of every radical is to be realistic. And what we need is radical change. People may be afraid of that word, but the idea that, we should treat animals as worthy of respect and consideration, that's a radical concept. The idea that people from other countries cannot overnight become the enemy because of nationalistic, jingoistic blather, that is still a radical concept. I mean, we do a show about Billy Tipton, who was born Dorothy, cross-dressed her whole life. And there are 3 points in the show. One where we deal with racism, which I think is taken the most seriously. And then there's a point where where there's some stuff against women, a little less seriously, but it's still there. Then there's a point where we talk about the Japanese, because Billy was, of course, accosted, because any man who wasn't in uniform during the 40s was a suspect. And it's almost no response. It's still okay through the prism of World War II to do what you like to other people, or through the prism of any war, because they have become the enemy, and what you're going to do, So
it's amazing to see how quickly Americans can be propagandized to hate people they don't know.
Right.
Meaning, like right now, they're doing it with Iran.
Right.
And people don't know the history of the United States and Iran, that Iran was actually had a democratically elected president, and then the United States, through the CIA, overthrew Mossadegh because he wanted to keep their oil, natural resources for their people. And he wanted to spread democracy around the Middle East. And the CIA was afraid of democracy because democracy is hard to control.
Right.
So that's why we back all these right-wing dictators like Saudi Arabia and what have, and that's why we installed the Shah, who was an oppressive dictator of Iran after we got rid of Mossadegh, because he was easier to control, right? And then, of course, the people revolted against our puppet, the Shah, and that's how we got the Ayatollah, and that's how they got this extreme right-wing takeover, which is kind of a little bit similar to what's happened in the United States, that you take away real democratic representation from people, and we go to a right-wing demagogue like Trump.
Right.
And people don't realize that that's how we got Trump, from voting the lesser of two evils since 1980. And that's how you get Trump. And you have to break that at some point. And it's just mind-boggling to me that people who I respect, who I know are smarter than me, have a huge blind spot like that. And they keep, Martin Luther King said we can no longer take the tranquilizing drug of incrementalism.
Right.
And here we are 50 years later, and everyone's like, well, got to keep doing it.
Right.
Nope, keep doing it. And if you don't do it, you're immoral.
Right. Right.
That's what people tell me. They tell me I'm responsible for Trump,
right.
Not Chris Hayes, who showed his empty podium instead of covering Bernie. Ed Schultz just revealed that his boss, the boss of everybody at MSNBC, wouldn't allow them to cover Bernie Sanders. And nobody's mad at MSNBC. Nobody's mad at Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes. Everyone's mad at it. Jagoff nightclub comedians or actresses or activists. They're never mad at people with money and power. Isn't that funny?
Well, the Democratic Party is the party of scapegoating. It's never their fault. It always has to be outside.
Yes, external locus of control,
right.
Which is what I've said. That's why we're a nation of adult children of alcoholics.
Right.
So we don't get angry at the person who's abusing us. We get angry at the person who tells us the person's abusing us.
Right. Right.
And that's why people get mad at me.
Right.
And anybody who tells the truth about the system, shut up.
Right.
You're a purist.
Right. Right.
I've had assholes who write for The Atlantic on Twitter say I'm a purist. I'm just like, no, you're the reason why we have Trump, you stupid asshole.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm as, I'm not, I didn't go to good schools.
Right.
I'm a real blue collar, straightforward. I went to college. I went to Illinois State, right? I didn't go to University of Illinois, right? I went to Illinois State.
Right.
And the fact that I know better makes me know that they know better. And they just choose not to. Like when the housing bubble burst, I knew it was going to burst a year ahead of time. And I'm like, because I figured it out. I'm like, and I had never bought a house. And I figured out what was going on because I had a friend who was a mortgage broker, and he told me what was going on. And I'm like, how can all these people afford this house? And he told me, stated income, they don't do any check, they're just giving it. I'm like, what? So that's what I knew. So if I knew it was going to happen, I know they knew. Everybody at CNBC knew it was going to happen. Everybody on Wall Street, every economic writer for the New York Times and the Washington Post knew, and nobody said a goddamn thing.
Right.
So they're all complicit in our demise. And then when we do go belly up, they start looking for scapegoats.
Right.
Oh, it's people who couldn't pay too many poor people bought houses they couldn't afford.
Right.
Did you ever hear someone say that? I did.
Yeah, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I just know friends who would identify as, I don't know, maybe not limousine liberals, but champagne communists who buy in to the foreclosures. My friends in. Anyway, but I'm just like, you shouldn't be doing that.
So how do you keep your friendships in this era?
I shouldn't even mention that because,
I've lost a lot of friends.
Yeah.
I've lost a lot of friends. I have.
Yeah.
I can't compromise.
Right.
I'm not going to compromise.
Right.
Right. So how do you negotiate that?
I think I'm less worried about that than whether I compromise. Whether you vote, whether or not you take part in a primary. Say Bernie was the nominee. Do you vote for that? How big how far do you go? I do think the only way to stand on your own 2 feet is to adhere to your principles, especially when voting. If I rob a liquor store and I shoot somebody, does California still have the death penalty?
No.
If I'm in the right state, I could die or I could be put away for life. But of course, the people in power can advocate for in their columns, can vote for, can decide to assassinate somebody, and you get $60 million book deals and parties on yachts, So this has always been this way. This is a great line that Sinatra says in a movie called Suddenly about it. Just, you kill one Joe, you get sent away for life, but, you can blow up 100,000 people with an atomic bomb. It's from the 50s. I mean, everybody knows this stuff, and yet you're a hero for that. You get a medal for it, and everybody knows the innate hypocrisy of our society. It's sadistic. That's part of the sadism. We're constantly, being bounced around, and told that we do one thing that will get somewhere, and you don't. You don't get ahead by being a good person or a hard worker, I'm bouncing around, but say in Fast Food Nation, they profile a guy who worked all his workable life for the company store, and this is for the meat industry, and his body just got destroyed. And at the end, I believe, he can't really move anymore. He's on disability. His leg has to be elevated all the time. He's living in poverty, and he still has his little certificate of appreciation. But
So,
just what you were saying though about the idea that you are somehow immoral for voting against the absolute horror and cruelty of the status quo, a status quo that is not only homicidal but suicidal. That's the mindfuck of all time. You are not immoral.
well, I thank you for saying that.
We've negotiated with this system for our whole lives. At least I have. No. And that's why I really wish Bernie wouldn't do it to us again.
Well, when they, when they did the $80 billion
Yeah.
like that for the Pentagon,
Right.
that's when I was just like, okay, I can't, I got to get out.
Yeah.
This is, I can't at all
Right.
support this.
Right.
They're doing it right in our face. Everybody's supposed to be afraid of Trump, and then they go ahead and give him 80 billion more in bombs.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And then they shame him if he doesn't use them.
I know.
And then when he does use them, they shame him again by saying, "Oh, you didn't really bomb Syria. You bombed an empty airfield."
Yeah.
Like, what has happened?
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
Right. Right.
So, so many heroes let me down. Everybody at MSNBC I used to look up to. I used to look up to Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes. I used to like them a lot. And then when Bernie came along, they revealed who they are, right?
Yeah.
They're soulless, no integrity, and they'll sell out for money like that.
Right.
And that's who Chris Hayes is, and that's who Rachel Maddow is. It is transparently manifest. That's who they are.
Right.
And it's the amount of letdown I feel. I think that is kind of equivalent to the amount of anger I express.
Right.
And me expressing that makes people come up to me and say, "Thanks for keeping me sane."
Right.
Because otherwise they think they're the only one who thinks that way. Just like Noam Chomsky taught us. That's the whole point of mass media, is to never have your opinion reflected back to you in the mass media, so you think you're the only one thinking that.
Right.
And then I come along and say, they're like, "Oh no, we all feel like that too."
Right.
We never see this anywhere else.
Right. But it's just, Howard Zinn has a book called Passionate Declarations, and it's a collection of essays on war and justice. And one of them is called Just and Unjust War. And he writes about how he read Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun, about the man in World War I, a boy, really. I mean, pretty much all wars are poor boys off to fight a rich man's war. And he comes back and he has no legs, he has no arms, he has no ability to speak or express himself, but he can think. And that's the whole book. And he read that and it made him profoundly anti-war. Nonetheless, World War II came along and he felt, finally, this is a just war. And he signed up and he was stationed in England as a bombardier. And he were always ready to go out on missions. And he wonders, looking back, whether it was so much the cause of justice, he really did believe in fighting fascism, or if it was that we were there now and we had these bombers, let's go use them. And one of the last missions he this was in the end of the war. The end was on. It was going to happen. But they were flying over sleepy French towns, dropping what he now knows was the first use of napalm, and just causing unimaginable devastation below. And he goes through every part of that war, and and every place it happened, and everything leading up to that war, what happened during, and then the aftermath, when many of the tenets of fascism, even if it was not completely expressed, but militarism, nationalism, these things continued, whether you had Hitler or not. And he talks about how it seems like it was inevitable, all of that, and how it isn't, and that there's always a different way, there's always a different way. It's a really well-written essay because he was there and he was a part of it. And it's just, it's brilliant. But one of the things he talks about with Truman, with the bombs, is the momentum, this terrible momentum. And when you have a weapon, any weapon, you want to use it. It's insane to think, for instance, that we're sitting on all these nuclear weapons, which have now been modernized, and that's never going to happen, that it's always going to be the madman theory. It's always going to be the mad theory. It's and that includes all the smaller, more acceptable weapons, the ones that aren't in violation of some treaty. If they exist, if you get $80 billion, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That guarantees the unimaginable.
That guarantees that we will use. Well, the stat I like to say, Steve O said this, that we are spending 40% more on our military than we were at the height of the Iraq War.
Wow.
Right now, we were spending $500 billion a year at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Now we're spending $700. That's a 40% increase.
Right.
There's, again, no debate about this. No campaigns. Nobody went and voted on this. Congress voted on it, but they don't represent.
Right.
They represent their donors.
Right.
Which is the problem.
And not only that, when people say Nader in 2000, first of all, of course, more Democrats voted for Bush in Florida than voted for Nader.
300,000 Democrats voted for Bush in Florida.
Right. Second of all, in a democracy, you have the right to vote for who you want. And that's a pretty basic yes. If we're going to live in even an illusion of democracy, you have to at least pretend to support that, and people don't. And then the idea that we're supposed to vote for the person who voted for Iraq in order to prevent another Iraq is inane. And then Iraq was sold by the media. The reason there's the concept of manufacturing consent is because it has to be manufactured. There has to be some consent given, or they can't do it, no matter how much they may want to. So if you're going to blame someone outside of the Bush administration for Iraq, you blame those people who voted for it, and you blame places like the New York Times, NPR. There was a consensus among the reasonable people.
Yeah, a consensus for war.
Yeah, and there still is. The New York Times has supported pretty much every war for the past 30 years.
Well, that's the thing about the Post. So I watch the movie The Post, and everyone's patting themselves on the back because they exposed the lies of the war, the Vietnam War. And then I walk out of the theater feeling good about our press, and then I realize, wait a minute, the Washington Post has supported every goddamn war since the Pentagon Papers.
Right.
Every one of them.
Right.
And they shamed you if you were against the Iraq War. Their op-ed, from their editorial board, said it is hard to conceive how anyone could deny that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. That's what they said in their editorial, Washington Post. When I was, I didn't even have a radio show at that time. I was just a nightclub comedian. And I was like, I know that's bullshit.
Right.
I know that's bullshit. The million people in the street know that's bullshit because there was 1 million people in the street protesting the Iraq War. Of course, it didn't get covered. Right? Just like they didn't cover Occupy Wall Street for a week.
Right.
Even though it was happening right outside their offices.
Yeah. But democracy dies in darkness.
Democracy dies in darkness. And now the guy who owns the democracy saving paper is in bed with the Pentagon and the CIA.
Oh, God.
And he manipulates our tax structure so he can be a billionaire.
Right.
And you know how he's going to spend that money now, right? You know what he said recently? That the only way I'd be able to spend my Amazon winnings, that's what he calls it, is through space travel.
Oh, God. I know.
Jeff Bezos has $120 billion. It costs $20 billion to end homelessness in America. He could end it like that.
Right.
$30 billion would end world hunger.
Right.
He could end it like that.
Right.
So, and he doesn't do either of those things.
Right.
And but he's going to spend it on space travel.
Right.
You know why? Because Jeff Bezos is a megalomaniac.
Well, they all are.
Yep.
There's so many people. There are people I agree with, but there's a reason you get ahead in life.
Yeah.
But it's Whitey on the Moon. It's Gil Scott Heron. That's wonderful.
What's that?
Whitey on the Moon. You know that poem?
No.
But is it Gil Scott Heron or Gil Scott Heron?
You got me.
It's really good, but it's all just it's a little bit bad propaganda towards rats, because I've known a lot of really nice rats, but it says a rat done bit my sister Nell, and Whitey's on the Moon. It's all about living in the ghetto.
Well, Nellie McKay, her new album is Sister Orchid, which I listened to it last night. I love it, right? Because first of all, you just have a great voice, and the way you phrase things, and it's just fantastic. I mean, just
Thank you.
fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
I have. You're a hero of mine musically, and so it's just a real big thrill. And I just encourage everybody. We're going to have you mind singing a song later? We can
Sure, I would love to.
Okay, so later that'll be another video. And Nellie McKay, your tour, you're going. Tell people where you're going.
Oh, all over, West Coast. Hey, anywhere.
Okay. So go to your website, which is.
My website is nelliemckay.com. But there are better websites.
No, go to nelliemckay.com, and they have her tour. They have her tour right there. So go check her out. I went and looked through it. She's playing a lot of really interesting spaces, a lot of great places.
Nice places like the Alberta Rose.
The Alberta Rose in Portland, which we're also playing there.
Yeah.
You're going to be there. That's a great space.
They have a spotlight. We did a chase sequence once. So if you guys want to use it.
Really? No
Yeah,
kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Plus, you're playing that Hotel Nico in San Francisco. That room looks so cool.
Oh, it's all right. Yeah, it's a bit of all right.
Yeah, I was jealous. I would like to play that room. That's a fantastic looking room.
Well, why don't you, Jimmy? If you got a good booking?
It said that it's music. They just do musical acts.
Well, you're going to get there, no problem.
I don't think they would let us. They would let me swear.
Oh, they let me swear.
Oh, do they?
I can't help it. It's the language of the working class.
Ha! That's what I tell my dad.
Really? Is he still in Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh,
he's still in
fabulous.
Chicago.
That's great. In the Jones show. Oh no, go ahead. Well, it's just in the Jones show, we have she runs into Dick Gregory in Chicago, and then he takes her to see Lenny Bruce at the I forget what the name
Green
of the
Mill?
club. No, it's something like not the Axe, I forget, the Claw. One of those the '60s clubs, and he talks a lot. I mean, Dick Gregory was so ahead of his time, and that doesn't get mentioned when he died. It was more the things that are accepted now. But he was. He didn't believe in the two-party system. He refused to vote for Goldwater. Against Goldwater in '64. He said, "I refuse to vote for the lesser of two evils." He was for animal rights ahead of his time. He compared what we do to people to what we do to animals, and he said he would look at a calf being taken from his mother and say that isn't right. And then he spoke out for free speech. He loved Lenny Bruce, and up till the 2000s when he was doing interviews, he would say, "I don't believe in shutting things away into the closet. Let's bring them out in the open and deal with them." So it's a shame to me that the left has lost that, that whether it's from who you vote for or what you say, it's always this word parsing and language policing, or it's to whistleblowers, silencing whistleblowers, that there's this preciousness, not just among liberals, but among the left, that seems antithetical to a genuine movement for liberation, which used to be about liberation. The free speech movement in Berkeley in 1965 was about total freedom for all people, and that we could all be seen as human. We didn't carry this cross. I really don't want to think that I have a uterus most of the day. I just want to eat and sleep and eat some more, and think and be a human being. And it's condescending. So much of this identity politics stuff that it's any woman, it's any marginalized person, surely it's a little bit about the person, I mean, surely we are this thing that we are, and that has been used, in systemic ways, for a long time. But then we are human. Below that, we are animal. We all share this planet. We do have some common interests, and one of those is the freedom to express ourselves.
Again, well said. That's fantastic. That's a great way to end this segment.
Oh, thanks, Jimmy.
That's fantastic. Everybody check out Nellie McKay. Go to nelliemckay.com for her tour schedule. Pick out her new album, Sister Orchid. It's fantastic. If you like classics, and her interpretation of them are fantastic. Just amazing. Thank you so much for being our guest, Nellie.
Thank you, Jimmy.
It's a real honor. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks.
Our next live Jimmy Dore show is July 1st in Portland, Oregon, and July 15th in Chicago, Illinois. We're doing a live show July 15th in Chicago, Illinois. Go to a link right there for all the tickets to all the live Jimmy Dore shows. Plus, if you can help become a premium member, we give you hours of bonus material every week. Become a patron or a premium member. And if you're on Steam It, we're steaming it right now. Plus, every Saturday, we do a live Super Solid Chat Saturday where it's a live stream and you can ask us questions and we'll answer them back. Every Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific time. Thanks for your support.